Hi there, everybody. So in this video, we will talk about how to look at your responses and where those are stored. So Google Forms works at storing responses in two places, essentially. So the form itself stores all of your responses. So if you notice up here, we have a questions tab and a responses tab. And this will be all of your responses that have been submitted through the form. It will give you a list of each question and how they were responded through a graph, like a chart or a bar graph, different things. If it was a short answer or paragraph, it will list your responses typed out. So you can kind of see here's an example of a bar graph there, another type of bar graph. So these are where your responses will be held. This is one of the places. And up at the top, so that's a summary. So then you can also look at it by question. So you have a drop down to list all of your questions. You can skip through the different questions here. And if there was a response, it will tell you which respondents did that responded to that question. And if you click on them, it will take you directly to that individual, which is the last tab here. So you can actually look at how a person filled out an entire form. So I would be able to see, I skipped through a lot of these, but you can see that I would see each individual response here where I filled in submitted that question, again, more. So you can get a real specific view of that. Now, this is all contained within the form. And anything that's submitted to the form will be saved here. It does not automatically go into a spreadsheet. We'll talk in a little bit about how that works in a spreadsheet, but it doesn't automatically go into a spreadsheet. It's saved here in the form. Now, you have some options when you're in the form. So if I go back to my summary here, I can see that there were 5 responses. I can see how, only one person selected 6th grade, but if we had multiple people select that, it would show up as more. I can do some things to kind of, I don't want to say dictate my data, but like, if I know, for example, that somebody responded to a form more than once, I can remove specific individual responses. So I can go up to individual here and I could delete a response. So if that first person, for example, was not correct, I could go to that first one and hit the trash button and say, do you want to delete this response? And it can't be undone because this is where it's saved. But if I say yes, now I'm down to 4 responses. So that's something good to know, that if you need to change that information. In addition to that, if you wanted to start over with your form, you would have the option of copying the form, which is up in your 3 dots here. So you could make a copy, or you could leave the form as it is and just delete all the responses, and that would wipe out everything from your form. So I would say only take that approach if that's what you want to do. Sometimes I would use that option in terms of like if I'm testing a form. So if I ran through a form 2 or 3 times and I wanted to just get rid of all my responses so that my data is fresh for when people start actually answering it, I could do that. Again, maybe I run through a form and some people have already started filling out, but I fill it out to test something. I could delete my one response by going to the individual. So I want to interject here, accepting responses option. This is how you turn the form on and off for collecting responses. Reason to use this tool is if you've already sent out the link, but you do not want to accept any more responses, you can turn that link off by sliding it over. That will mean then no matter if somebody has the link or not, they cannot submit any responses. So if you have a form that you have a deadline on and you're going to stop collecting the responses, you can turn it off at that time. There is also some add-ons that I'll talk about later, but in general, this is just a good way to stop collecting the responses so that you don't have any more responses coming in. So that's the form responses. Now, the other part of forms is the spreadsheet, so the Google Sheet that's involved with it, and you saw me working that in other videos. Initially, the way I created that was to come up to this spreadsheet icon right here, and right now it says View Responses and Sheets, and that's because I've already clicked it. and we've seen my spreadsheet. But the first time you create a form, before you've actually made that spreadsheet, or before you actually work on that spreadsheet, you have to create the spreadsheet. Creating the spreadsheet can happen at any time. You could have 100 responses in here. Once you click that spreadsheet, it will pull in all the responses. Now, what it won't do though is, before I had 4 responses, if I delete out any of those, or excuse me, before I had 5 responses, if I delete out any of those responses before I hit this spreadsheet button, it's not going to include those. So if you're worried about that, you could create the spreadsheet ahead of time and then have all your answers. But if you don't delete anything, all of your form responses would come into that. So that would create that spreadsheet for you. After you've created that sheet, you have some additional options with your spreadsheet. So I could create a brand new one, or I could pick a different sheet to have it go into. So if I have a form spreadsheet from a different form and I wanted both of those responses to come into the same spreadsheet, I could pick a destination. So instead of creating a brand new spreadsheet, I could put it in one that I've already created. And even if I didn't do that to begin with, I have that option here, select a response destination. So here it says create a new spreadsheet. That's the option you get the first time. But I could say select an existing spreadsheet, and when I do that, it's going to open up my Google Drive, and I could pick another spreadsheet to add those. So then maybe if I have 3 forms, so say for example, you are doing a form for 3 different class periods, and you wanted all that information kind of together. If there were 3 separate forms, you could have all of the responses go to the same spreadsheet, just listed in different tabs of that spreadsheet. What I mean by that is you could have a form responses tab here, there could be another one here and another one here, and those would be linked to different forms essentially, but they would all populate into the same overall spreadsheet. So just an option. And then also you can download as a CSV. I don't really recommend this unless you need to give it to somebody who doesn't have access to Google Sheets. Otherwise, putting them in a Google Sheet is probably the best way to do it. And then again, you could print all responses. That gives you like a PDF in long form of all of your responses. That can get kind of, you view it as what the question looks like, but that can get kind of tiresome or long. So I don't use that one option very often. And then lastly, I wanted to show you that there is a get email notification for new responses. So if you want to know when people are filling out your form without having to come in and check it, check this option here, and then an email will be sent to you when people submit a form to you. So that's a little bit about your spreadsheet responses. I am going to talk in the next video about how to work in the spreadsheet, because that's where a lot of the data can be tracked and organized and sorted through individually or by grouping. So we'll get to that section in the next video. Thanks.